Welcome to the Service to Syndication podcast, where we interview the biggest and most successful real estate entrepreneurs, investors, capital raisers in the world who have worn the uniform of this great country, those who provide services to our men and women in uniform, and other service-oriented professionals to provide you with the tool sets, the mindsets, and the skill sets to help you conquer your dreams and goals in real estate and to use this wealth creation vehicle so you can live a more successful, happy, and fulfilled life of generosity and prosperity. If what you desire is time, lifestyle, and financial freedom, you've come to the right place. We will bring to you the best real estate entrepreneurs who will give you the insights, the knowledge, experience, skills, so you can go out and crush it in whatever real estate asset class you desire. So grab a pencil and paper, sit back, and enjoy the ride on the Service to Syndication podcast. Hello, my servicemen and women and other service providers. Welcome to another episode of the Service to Syndication Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Cedric Marlow. I am a U.S. Navy vet. Here on the Service to Syndication Real Estate Podcast, we interview the most successful real estate entrepreneurs, investors, capital raisers in the world, where most have donned the uniforms of this great country. We aim to provide the tool sets, mindsets, skill sets for you to achieve your personal and business goals while using real estate as a wealth creation vehicle to help you live a more successful, happy, and fun-filled life. I am super excited today because I have Mr. Mike Cavaggioni.
Boom. Nailed it.
Who is a top-notch real estate investor and realtor. Before I properly introduce our guest to you, I just want to ask a favor of you. Please, if you get some value out of this interview, if you get some type of insight, mindset shift, if you learn new skill, new information, receive inspiration or motivation to go out and take some action and progress in your life, please share this episode with some of your friends. Send it to someone you know who might be or could be interested in real estate. Share it on your social media, post it on your wall, or share it in your stories. Help us spread our message while you help others. For all of you who share this episode, I want to say thank you. Again, everybody, as I said, today we have Mr. Mike Cavaggioni, and is a combat veteran and retired U.S. Navy officer, having served over 20 years. Mike is a licensed realtor associate, financial coach, real estate investor, and podcast host. Near the end of his Navy career, he shifted his focus to financial independence and entrepreneurship. Mike started investing in real estate and working his other side hustles to create passive income and become financially independent by 38. Mike is the host of the Average Joe's Finances podcast, a top 1% internationally ranked podcast. He started the podcast to share both his own and his guests' adventures in becoming financially independent. While learning the ins and outs of podcasting, he started to outsource some podcast-related tasks to a small team he had built. Realizing that other podcasters are likely facing the same challenges, he created his own podcast production agency called Edit Pods. Mike now help other podcasters grow and monetize their show. All right, again, welcome, Mike. Listen, the first thing that I like to do with my guests, I ask them to walk us through the real estate journey in 75 seconds or less.
Okay, 75 seconds. Here we go. So I know when we talked before we started recording, I told you I started investing in 2019. However, my first taste of real estate investing was back in 2007. I bought my first primary residence, became an accidental landlord when I had to PCS. And of course, we all know what happened in 2008, 2009. Stuff hit the fan, and I wound up having to short sell that property, leaving a very bad taste in my mouth, which is why I didn't get back into real estate until 2019. So in 2019, I bought a duplex back in Chesapeake, Virginia. I was actually over in Hawaii at the time, so 5,000 miles away, doing everything sight unseen with a camera, video. And that was a learning experience for me as well, because when we closed on that property, we started back in November of 2019. We closed on it February 5th, 2020. So again, think about the dates here. I must have great timing because the very next month the world essentially ended. So I ran into some problems there. But being a real estate investor and being a brand new real estate investor, one of the things that you do is you get creative. And I was able to find a program that got one of my tenants set up, back paid all the rent that he couldn't pay and all the late fees. And that property wound up cash flowing about $950 a month. Fast forward a little bit more, I started learning about multifamily real estate. I sold that duplex, took some of the profits from that, got into my first real estate syndication as an LP. And then over the last year, 2 years, I got into two more, kind of back to back, by taking money out of my thrift savings plan and then also pulling money out of my equity in my home using a HELOC, using Velocity Banking to purchase those next two with partners. And that's what I continue to do today. And that's me.
Nice, nice.
Did I meet the 75-second threshold? I might have gone a little bit over, but I'm from New
No,
York,
no,
man.
you
Sometimes I can't shut up.
no, you're good. You're good. It's all good. So, Mike, your financial coach, real estate investor, realtor, and let's not forget the most important job, being a husband and father. Where do you find the time?
Well, I look through all my bags and everything, and I try to find more. But obviously, we can't get any more in the day. Can't create any more. So you have to make the time, right? And by make the time, I mean I time block, right? So I figure out what my day is going to look like, and I piece it all together. And I attempt in my best efforts to follow the time block schedule that I put together. Things come up and things change. We all know that. But, you know, throughout my 20 years in the Navy, one of the things I learned to be is very flexible, right? Because things change all the time. We all think we're coming home from deployment, and all of a sudden you get that steak and lobster dinner. You know what just happened, right? Things change. So, I think that's given me a skill set that I utilize now outside of the Navy, that actually helps me with my, I guess, quote unquote, time management. I can't really call it management because I'm not managing it. I'm just trying to be effective with my time. And so, yes, it is difficult to manage a bunch of things at once. However, I learned one of the best things to do is outsource. So I began outsourcing certain things. Like, I have a couple different things going on, like with my podcast editing business. Realistically, what do I do with that? Not much at all. I have a whole team that takes care of it. I'm just kind of the face of it. Same thing with my podcast. I record the podcast episodes. I upload it to my team, and then I don't do anything else with it unless they ask me a question like, "Hey, what do you want this episode name to be?" And that's pretty much it, right? So I've learned kind of the hard way to start outsourcing, and I'll say it that way because when I first started investing in real estate again, for the second time, and then started my podcast to talk about my own personal finance journey, I started to burn myself out very quickly. Between doing all my stuff on the East Coast and being in Hawaii, dealing with that 6-hour time difference made things difficult. It was a regular occurrence to get a call from my property manager at 2 o'clock in the morning, because something happened, right? I would work 12-hour days during my active duty job, and I'd come home and say, "Okay, I got to edit my podcast so I can make sure I can get it out by the end of this week." I'd put like an hour a day into editing, sometimes a little bit more, because I'm like a perfectionist. I wanted to be perfect, which it wasn't, but that's the way I was making it work. And then I realized, it took me 6 months to realize this. Unfortunately, 6 months too long, right? But um, that I was doing all this stuff and neglecting my family, you know, and I started to realize like this is not okay. I got to figure something out, and that's when I really started investigating into outsourcing. Now my podcast wasn't making money at the time, so I wasn't really comfortable paying a team. to do the podcast, but I said, you know what? What's my time worth to me? Right. So I said, it's worth me paying for this. So I made a small budget for the podcast and said, okay, cool. I'm hiring a team. I hired this team. They would work in my show. And as things kind of progressed over the next couple months, I said, there's probably other people out there that are going through something similar to me. So why don't I talk to this team and see if I could fully bring them on board, and let's do this and help other podcasters. And that's what we did. I saw a need, right? As most entrepreneurs do, right? You see a need and you want to put something out there to help other people that were in a similar situation as you. And that's how I created Edit Pods. Now there's been some ups and downs with that, hiring and firing editors and all that stuff, but now we're in a really good spot and we're scaling, right? So, but again, for me, there's not much involvement, as I'm pretty much the face of it. Now, as far as real estate, I got my real estate license. I was doing real estate transactions as a real estate agent. I mostly focus now on doing just referrals because honestly, if I'm not going to be able to give the time to a client that I feel like I should be giving to them, I don't want to disservice anybody. That's just not for me, right? I don't want to be the guy that says, "Yeah, I got you," and then all of a sudden, every time you call me, you're getting my voicemail. You know, so for me, I stick with mostly with referrals. I have a great team out here, so when I get somebody that needs some help, I get them somebody on my team, and then I get a piece of that commission. It's a beautiful thing. One of the other things I did though, because of my podcast and my outreach, is I started building a network of realtors in all 50 states, right? And now I know people that are PCSing, coming and going and leaving Hawaii and going to other places. They want to buy a place when they get out there. I link them up with another realtor out there. And guess what? I get another piece of that commission as well. So I started this referral business. Um, when it came to my own personal finances, right? Just the things that I had to do to get myself out of debt and get myself to a point where I can actually afford to buy my own piece of real estate out here in Hawaii. That was one of those things where I'm like, there's other people that probably need similar help doing, in similar situations that need help to get there. So I started coaching, right? And I did a lot of pro bono work, which realistically, those were always the ones that wouldn't really make changes. But the folks that actually paid for the coaching felt a little bit more like, hey, I don't want to waste my money. Let me listen to what this guy actually says, right? And I've seen them be way more successful than the folks that I was helping for free. So, but there was a lot of service members that I just, in situations that I was like, hey, let me just help you out here. Here's some stuff. Here's a great, spending plan, and this is how you got to put it together. Um, yeah, and some of them did okay, and some of them just they don't want to listen. But it's all good, man. To me, it's about that service and giving back. So I know it's kind of a lot to unpack there. Again, like I said, I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm Italian. Sometimes I can't shut up. I'll just talk and talk and talk forever. But yeah, that's that's pretty much it, man.
All right, sweet. Um,
Episode's
so
done.
yeah, show's done. We're done. All right. So what prompted you to join the military?
Okay. So, couple factors here, right? So, I was going into my senior year of high school, and I knew I wanted to go to college because I had to. It took me a little while to get my act together in high school, right? My junior year is actually when I got my act together and actually started doing pretty decent in school. Ninth and 10th grade is kind of a blur, and kind of, I mean, let's just say in my junior year of high school, I was still taking ninth grade math because I wouldn't go to class, you know? So that became a problem. I was failing a lot of class. I mean, literally, like going to my junior year, I think I had like a 1.3 GPA or something like that. It was awful. I was like near the bottom of the class. And it wasn't because I was stupid. It was just because I was lazy and didn't want to go to class. So I was like, okay, well, my junior year, I'm like, I'm getting close now, and something's got to give. I'm going to do something when I get out of high school, right? I don't want to be a bum. So let me try to figure this out. I started getting my act together. And then my junior and senior year of high school, my GPA was about a 3.5. And I brought my overall GPA GPA up to like a 2.7, 2.8, which honestly, if you look at my ninth and 10th grade years, that was phenomenal. However, it was not good enough to get into the college I wanted to get into, which was SUNY Stony Brook up on Long Island, right? It's a really high level school. And that's where I wanted to go. And so I was like, okay, I'll just go to community college and figure it out. And then my dad was like, okay, who's paying for that for you? Like, he's like, I'm not paying for you to go to college. You got to figure that out. Like, go apply for scholarships in this. I was like, what scholarships can I get? I was like, look at what I did in high school. Like, nobody's going to give me a scholarship. So I was like, oh man, I started to scramble. So I'm going into my senior year trying to figure out, okay, what's life really going to look like after high school, man? Oh man. So I was like, I could just go get a job, but I don't want to be flipping burgers and stuff. I have no skills. So I started looking at the military because I was like, okay, they could help me pay for college and all that. And I was looking at the National Guard, and then I was looking at the Marines. So if I would have did the National Guard, I would have been stuck, when 9/11 happened, I would have been in the city doing that stuff because the way that they had their program was that you go to basic training between your 11th and 12th grade year, high school year, and you actually start while you're in high school. You can only do that program if you're 17, right? So I'd considered doing it, but then I wound up not doing it. I talked to the Marine Corps, and I really wanted to be a Marine, right? But the Marine Corps recruiter was just, man, he was just mean. Like he was, I mean, if you're trying to recruit somebody and, be a little nicer. So I was like, I don't know if I'm feeling this. And I was like, I don't know if the military is going to be for me. I talked to the other branches previously. The Navy, I wasn't really interested in. I mean, I thought there was some cool aspects to it, but I wasn't really interested in it. All of a sudden, another Navy recruiter calls me one day and says, "Hey, what do you really want to do after high school?" I said, "Well, I want to go to college and start a career, and live a good life." And man, he used those selling skills on me and sold me on the Navy like quickly. I was just like, all right, fine, I'll come in and talk to you a little bit more, right? Talked to him and decided that okay, maybe this will be a good ride for me. So I joined the Navy and I said, I just want to take this serious, and I'm going to do my 4 years. I'm going to use my GI Bill and go to school. Well, at the end of my 4-year contract, I got married, literally like right before I was going to get out. And my wife was like, "Hey, dude, what are you going to do when you get out?" I said, "Oh, we'll move back to New York, and I'll work for my dad's company while I'm going to school." And she's like, "Okay, well, I want to start a family, so I don't want to live with your parents or my parents back in New York. So what are we going to do?" I'm like, "Oh, shoot." I wound up re-enlisting, right? So 2 days before I was supposed to get out. But anyway, the story was how I got into the Navy. That's how that happened. We can dive into that other stuff if you want later on.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So it sort of kind of sounded like this was a means to an end.
It
You
was. It
joining the
was because I
military.
wanted to go to school, which
Okay.
which oh by the way, I still never finished my degree. I have 172 college credits and no degree. So
Okay. All right. We're gonna pause right there because
sure, sure.
all right. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you're military. You were an officer.
Yep.
You
I
you
sure
were an
was.
officer.
Sure
So
was without a degree.
yeah. So explain it to those of us. Well, I have an idea of how you got it, but
I'm
explain
pretty
it
sure
to
you
the
know.
rest of our
You were in the
military
Navy, so
people.
you know. So I did this program called the Limited Duty Officer Program. It's where once you're E6 or above, or you're E6 up for chief, you can apply for this program. So I did. I applied and I picked it up on my first try because for me, even though I didn't want to stay in the Navy, I always worked really hard and I always wanted to put my best effort forward because I feel like if you're going to do anything, like whatever you do in life, do it successfully, right? Or give it your all.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with the Navy. So I wound up picking it up first try, and I commissioned, right, without a degree. So it's one of those programs where you don't have to have a bachelor's degree to commission. They look for their top enlisted talent, and you get commissioned to work in that field that you were in. Particularly for me, I was a yeoman. I was a admin, right? So I commissioned as an admin limited duty officer. Um, Absolutely loved it, man. It's one of those things that you stay very busy and you put under a lot of pressure. But for me, that's kind of where I thrived, and that's how I was able to commission in the Navy without a degree.
Okay. All right. So now you're a military officer, and for those of you who are not in the military who may be watching this, military officers make fairly decent income. Why even consider real estate? Like, like even when you retire, you could have just coasted, got your nice job, and take that retirement and just been happy. Been a pretty, decent you know, not investor, but decent citizen, and without all the headaches and heartaches that come with real estate.
Sure, sure. So, so why real estate? That's a great question, but I'll give you a little bit of background on my thoughts and feelings with real estate, right? So, it actually got put in my head a long time ago when I was a kid, right? My uncle, he invested in real estate. He was a state corrections officer for the state of New York and made decent money and was going to get a pension from the state and honestly be able to live comfortably at the end of his service to the state of New York. But he was buying real estate. He was buying all these properties in upstate New York, and every time we went out there to visit him, I would ask him like, "Hey, uncle, why do you have so many houses? Like, why are you buying all these homes? You only need one." And he told me, he's like, "Well, he's like, one day I'm going to retire, and when I retire, you know, i- it's decent, but I don't think it's going to be enough to live the life that I want to live and give my family what I want to give my family." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well."
Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Service to Syndication podcast. If you are a military service man or woman, government employee, or any other service related professional, this is for you. I once was where you are. As a service member, I lived paycheck to paycheck. As a government employee, I knew there was more out there for me. I tried all the get rich quick schemes. None of them worked. Then a friend of mine introduced me to real estate investing. I am a commercial multifamily syndicator who helps those who have served in the military and those who provide services to our men and women in uniform and other service oriented professionals achieve their time, lifestyle, and financial freedom by investing passively into multifamily real estate. If you know that this life has more in store for you, I invite you to tune into the Service to Syndication podcast to learn the tools, tricks, and concepts to help you achieve the time, lifestyle, and financial freedom that comes with investing in real estate. So go over to cobbscreekcapital.us. That is COBBSCREEKCAPITAL.US and schedule a call so that we can get to know one another and see how we can work together to help you achieve your goals.
He's like, one of the things about real estate is he was telling me about how you could save money on your taxes, how you can create like this cash flow that he's like, I'm going to retire from being a corrections officer. And he's like, he's like, I'm going to work between the first and the fifth. And on those days between the first and the fifth, what I'm doing is I'm driving around and collecting rent checks. And I could wear whatever I want. I could do whatever I want. Nobody could tell me what to do. And that appealed to me, right? I was like, I like that. So that was always in the back of my head. So in 2007, when I got my first property, I was an E5. I was 22 years old. I thought I was on top of the world and indestructible. I wasn't paying attention to the real estate market. I didn't know any of that stuff, right? Had I known, well, really had anybody known, had we had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't have purchased a house in 2007. Or if I did, I would have made a better purchase in an area where I know I'd be able to rent it out indefinitely. But in that particular area where I did recruiting duty, it was not a market where you could really rent the property. It wasn't even really a market that appreciates. It just kind of stayed steady. I had no idea. I was living the American dream. I was 22 years old, bought a home, with my wife, and we were gonna, our thing was we're not gonna have a kid until we own a home. We bought a home. We had our first kid. Man, living the dream, right? Well, yeah. Anyway, I already explained that story about what happened there and had to short sell that property. So real estate kind of just fell off just fell off the face of the earth for me. Fast forward to when I came out to Hawaii. Haven't purchased a home since 2007, but I said, when I go to Hawaii, I said, I want to buy a home. I want to own some property out there because I heard that the Hawaii market appreciates very well. I said, I don't want to waste my BAH living in base housing or renting a place when I could take my tax free money to buy a tax deductible asset that will pay off in the long run. So that's what we did. We came out here. We paid off all of our debt from the short sale and all the other credit card debt that we racked up, which is where the financial coaching comes in, right? Because I got some really good strategies on that. But we got to this point where we were debt free and we had $40,000 sitting in the bank and coming out here using our VA loan to buy this property. So bought the property, put a lot of work into it. That 40 grand was gone before you know it. Um, and I was talking with a friend of mine that I was stationed with during my first officer tour on the Theodore Roosevelt. And he was telling me about, he's like, oh yeah, I've got these properties back in Virginia that's kind of been a pain in my neck and this and that. I said, oh, you have rental properties? He's like, yeah. And at the time he had like 28 doors.
Wow.
And I said, hey man, well, tell me about it. I was like, cause I always wanted to really invest in real estate. So we started talking and I started remembering those conversations with my uncle. I'm like, and the bug just bit the crap out of me, man. And I come home and I'm talking to my wife. I said, hey, babe, check this out. I think we should invest in real estate. I was like, I'm getting close to, you know, 20 years in the Navy. I'm probably going to punch out, and I don't think my retirement's going to be enough for us to be sustainable, to live the life that we want to live with our family. And she's like, oh no, 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 no. Cause she remembered what happened in 2007 to 2012 timeframe with that property. And she's like, no, no, we're not going to do that again. And I was like, oh, come on, come on. We can figure this out. I was like, let's go have lunch with my buddy and we'll talk about it. So him and his wife got with me and my wife. We had lunch together. They were showing us their portfolio, what they were doing. I had researched a couple deals that I brought there with me and said, hey, how do these look? How do these numbers look? And he's like, hey, you actually found two pretty good deals. And I'm looking at my wife and she's looking at me and she's like, and I'm like, come on. I was like, I think this will be a good move for us. And she finally caved and we bought this duplex in Chesapeake. And I told you what happened there, right? We bought that and then COVID happened. And it's like, why me? Why me? And it was kind of, she gave me like that I told you so look. Uh, but again, I got creative. I found this rent repayment program. They hooked this guy up, paid back all of his late rent, and that property actually wound up doing well. It still was kind of a money pit. I had to put a lot of repairs into it. But yeah, in the end, it cash flowed and I sold it for a profit a year later and took that money and got into multifamily real estate. And I got into that because I started going to different real estate meetups, meeting folks and learning all these different strategies. I didn't know that there's all these different ways to invest in real estate. I thought all you do is you buy a property, you rent it out, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I started learning about all these different things. I said, okay, I'm really interested in all this stuff. And as I was learning, a buddy of mine, I'd started a blog talking about my path to financial freedom. And my buddy said, hey, you should start a podcast about this. So I'm like, okay, yeah, why not? He twisted my arm. I start the podcast and I'm learning about all these different aspects of real estate. So I said, hey, while I'm learning about this, why don't I bring people on the show and ask them the questions I want to ask them? Maybe that'll help other people. And that's what I did. And that's how I learned about multifamily real estate and some of these other strategies, and then started getting into it myself. So long story short, got into single family right away. Same issues I had as the first time, but in a different aspect. Still found a way to get around it, make it successful. Got into multifamily real estate, learned all these different strategies. I got into velocity banking by taking my HELOC out and getting into more multifamily. And that's how I got to where I'm at today. So
All
I'll
right.
catch my breath now.
Cool. I I was gonna bring this back later, but since you just mentioned it, let's talk about the velocity banking. Explain that to our listeners who may not know what that is.
Yeah, sure. So, all right, Cedric. So, velocity banking is easy, but can be very complicated when you start looking at the math. And I think this is where a lot of people get lost in it, right? Every time I've talked to folks about it, I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain it, and I've kind of figured it out as we go. But velocity banking is where you have your primary residence, or it could be a rental property that you have, or even a business that you have that has equity in it, right? You'll take out a line of credit. So on a home, it will be a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. On a business, it'll be a BLOC, a business line of credit, right? But what you do is you get this line of credit, and it usually has a decent interest rate that's held at that rate for 3 to 5 years, and then it becomes variable, right? Just like a variable rate mortgage, right? Um, but what you do is you take your equity in your home, you get this line of credit, and you pay down big chunks of your mortgage, right? And as you pay down these big chunks of your mortgage, you take all of your pay and you dump it into the HELOC, right? And anytime you have bills or any other expenses, you pay for it out of the HELOC. And every time you get paid, you dump it into the HELOC. Well, what does that do? As you're chunking down your mortgage, you're building more equity, right? And then as you're putting all your money into it, you're lowering the amount of interest that you're paying on that HELOC. So the difference is on a HELOC, you're paying simple daily interest versus amortized 30-year interest that you're paying on a mortgage, right? So people are like, well, aren't you paying more interest when you do it that way? Yes and no, right? Because let's say you take your HELOC and you pay off all your credit cards. Now you're paying that 4% interest rate, because mine's 4%, right? So you're paying that 4% interest rate instead of that 17% interest rate to 23% interest rate that you're paying on that credit card. And it's simple interest. So as you pay it down, your interest payments go down, right? Now your mortgage. Now for me, I have an extremely low interest rate on my property because I refinanced at the right time, but I still use velocity banking. So I have a 2.25% interest rate on my mortgage. And they're like, Mike, your HELOC is 4%. Why are you chunking down your mortgage that way? For me, it's the liquidity, right? So as I pay down my mortgage, I go back to the lender and say, hey, as you can see over the past couple of months, I paid my mortgage down $50,000. I'd like to increase my line of credit by $50,000. And they say, well, yes, it looks like you have done that and you do have the equity. So easy peasy lemon squeezy. They increase my line of credit, right? What's that do for me? That gives me access to more liquid funds for when, like, if something does pop up, I could jump into it. Um, I'll give you an example. I started a business, a business that failed, honestly, but I had the liquidity to do that. Now I'm kind of out a lot of money from it, but at the same time, it didn't impact me as much because I'm paying it down relatively quickly because I'm doing the velocity banking, right? Um, but I had that liquidity to start this business and to buy the assets that I needed for that business because I was chunking down my mortgage and giving myself more liquidity. Now, I don't plan on paying off my house early. I could, if I wanted to, doing this method, I could pay off my house in 7 to 9 years, maybe even a little less than that. For me, I probably want to pay it down about halfway, just to have that liquidity because honestly, a 2.25% interest rate on my mortgage is it's almost free money, man. It's like it's kind of ridiculous. When I refinanced the property, my first mortgage payment I was already paying more into the principal than I was into interest. Because I had a 2.25% interest rate and a 2.26% APR. So right away, I'm
Wow.
paying more into the principal. So anyway, long story short, velocity banking allowed me to turn my house into a checking account. And I use that to make all my purchases as I chunk it down and then increase my liquidity. So when that next good deal pops up, I've got the down payment. I've got it right here. Boom, here's a check. Right. So that's why I do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I didn't make it too confusing. Because the
Yeah,
simple
no.
interest versus amortized interest, like if I did pay off my house early and I just
Mhm.
put it all on the HELOC, um, yes, the interest at 4% is I'm paying way more interest than I am at 2.25%. However, the money that I'm dumping into my principal and I'm knocking it down faster because my amortized interest is not over 30 years. It is simple. It's happening right there. So each time I make a payment, my interest is less and less and less.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, um, outside of that duplex that you had out there in Chesapeake, Do you have any other single family assets at this time?
No, that was it.
That was it. Okay.
Yeah, I got right into multifamily after that.
Nice. Okay. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Um, in multifamily, I know earlier you said that you're a limited partner. Are you currently a general partner on any of your deals? And if not, why do you stick with the LP side of investing?
Okay, great question. So, on the ones that I'm currently in right now, no, I am a LP strictly on all of those deals. However, I did just recently start working with some other partners to be a GP on some other deals. Um, and let's just say it's been a lot of underwriting, a lot
Yes.
of letters of intent, and stuff not moving because to make the deals work, we have to come in low, right? And a lot of these guys are not going to sell at that price point. I decided to become a general partner at a very bad time, but that's okay. So the deals that I'm a limited partner on have been pretty phenomenal, right? So one of them I could tell you, like this past June, just gave me a nice big payment because it was 20 months into it. They repositioned their debt and refinanced, and this asset was purchased at 6.6 million. It's 102 units. And when they refinanced, it got appraised at 13 million. So they pretty much doubled the price in 20 months. So, yes, as an LP, what I love about it is I don't have to worry about the operations. I don't have to worry about anything except for take my money and I'll get a return, right? Um, I don't. But the thing is, the caveat to that is I don't have any say in what the operators do, right? But at the same time, for me, I like the stress-free environment that it provides for me because I don't have to worry about anything. I just collect my checks every month. Well, some of them are every month, some of them are every 3 months. So one of them pays quarterly. But the thing is, I invested with a good team, right? And I think that's probably the most important thing for anybody that's out there that wants to be passive and invest as a limited partner is making sure that you invest with a great team that has a great track record, and that the guys know what they're doing, right? But anyway, so they repositioned their debt. I got a nice fat check. Literally, it hit my bank account on my birthday this past June 2nd. It was like, oh, happy birthday to me. Where did this come from? And I saw the deposit, and then obviously I wasn't keeping up with my emails and saw the email where they said, "Hey, we're repositioning, and this is where we're at, and this is all the details." And they sent out a video. I'm like, yeah, I probably should have watched that. So I'm terrible when it comes to my email. When I get to it, I get to it. And I'll always look at the quarterly reports,
Yes.
uh, but sometimes I might not look at it. The day that it's sent, it might be 2 weeks later. So I saw, basically they had sent that email 2 weeks earlier, and I would have known that that money was coming. But it was a pleasant surprise. And the thing is, I still have my stake in that property. They didn't buy the investors out, so I'm still in it. I just got a nice fat 21% return off of my initial money, which was awesome. Um, but yeah, so Cedric, what I like about being a limited partner is that, especially if you get yourself into a higher income paying job, which I've done, it's a way for me to take some of my income, keep it in real estate, but also get all the tax benefits of being an owner of that real estate. So while I don't have a say in it, I am still technically a part owner of these properties, and I get to write that stuff off. I get to write off the expenses. They did a cost segregation study, so I got all that advanced depreciation. My first syndication in my first year, I got to write off 80% of what I put into it. So the tax burden was a loss. I got to write to the IR, do my taxes and say, "Hey, I took, this much of a loss this year." So that goes against my income. Now it's like, okay, well, you paid this much in taxes off your income, but you lost this much in real estate. So, yeah, you're not going to pay as much. Even though I was paying, I still didn't pay. I still didn't have to pay as much in taxes as I would have if I didn't have these real estate assets that had my back. So I think that's one of there's so many benefits that kind of all trickle down together that
Right.
maybe like a lot of people don't think about. They only think about that return on investment. Well, there's a whole lot more than just the return on investment. It's these tax write-offs that you get too. It's the as you put your statements, your financial statement together, it's what you can claim, pieces of it that you can claim towards your net worth. And as you build up your net worth, you get to a point where you become an accredited investor, and you can get yourself in bigger and better deals, which is what I've been working towards. So it's been really fun to do that.
Okay. Okay.
And
So,
Cedric, I want to point out too, for the busy professional, like I started this when I was active duty. For me, that was the great part about it. Like I was working 12-hour days. I didn't have time to sit here and hunt deals and do all this other stuff. So when I got into multifamily real estate, man, it was a breath of fresh air. So there was other people that were doing all the work. All I had to do was put money into it. Love it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, like say for instance, myself, I'm a multifamily investor primarily. I like being on the GP side, being active in what it is that I do. However, I do have some LP assets as well, but I primarily like to be, active in what I do. So I totally get everything that you just discussed. So when you're investing in these opportunities, one, how are you finding them? And two, how are you vetting the operators?
All right, Cedric. I love those questions because those are very important for anybody that wants to get into multifamily real estate as a LP as well. Um, so for me, I started going to a bunch of real estate meetups and networking and building my network. And then one of the biggest ways I built my network, and I mentioned this earlier, was through my podcast. I was bringing people on and asking them these questions about how they invest in multifamily and stuff. And I actually found partners that way. Um, I was actually at a real estate conference going to speak at a conference, and I got an email from a guest that I had previously had on. And this was right after I took out my HELOC. So this was the first thing I got into with my HELOC. But she had emailed me and said, "Hey, Mike, I got this deal. We're only going to bring in a few GPs for this. It's a small 38 unit. But I'm sorry, no, it was a 32 unit. It wasn't even that much. So small 32 unit out here, right next to the University of Monmouth. And I wanted to see if you were interested in investing in it. Here's the numbers and all that. So I did a little bit of research on the area, and besides what was already sent to me, and that's the piece that I want to point out, right? I didn't just trust the slide deck that was sent to me or the presentation that I sat through. I did a little bit of research myself. I looked at other assets in the area. I was looking at what, you know, so a lot of these were one bedroom, one bath because it's by the college campus. So I was looking at, okay, how much are one bedroom, one baths renting for? And I was like, okay, these are renting for way less. Lots of opportunity here, right? To build up rent and. So I said, okay, this is actually pretty decent. I was looking at the growth in the area. What's the economy look like? What kind of jobs are there? But for me, the main focus was, okay, they got this university there. This thing's right there by the university. This can be like student housing haven, right? So I was like, this is a pretty good spot to be in. So I said, yeah. I said, I'm gonna jump in with you on this. So I got back from that conference and I wired her the money. Now this was the second syndication I got into. I can tell you the first one I got into, it was very tough wiring that money. It was very scary. The second one, I just went to the bank and said, "Hey, yeah, I need you to send this to this account to this person ASAP," and that was that. The next one, same thing. Good deal came by, and I said, "Yep, wiring the money right now." That's it. So, but yeah, so doing your own due diligence on the asset itself is huge. But then also finding people that you can know, like, and trust, right? That's how I vet the people that I work with. Do I know you? Do I like you? Do I trust you? And how do I build that trust? Well, I build it by looking at your track record. I look at, past deals that you have done. How many times have you had to do a capital raise, right? Outside of, the normal raise, because a lot of times people don't realize that, if you're doing a lot of capital raises, that means a lot of things are going wrong. So, okay, how are you planning out, the renovations and, you know, how are you planning out how you're spending your investor capital? The money that I'm giving you, how are you spending it to turn it into more dollars for me? Right. So that's the important thing. I want to know what kind of plan they have. That's why I think it's very important that you go to any type of, if you're going to invest with somebody, if they're having like a video call where they're going over the slides and they're going over the information, man, you better be at that and you better be asking questions, right? And then if you're not getting the answers that you want, or you're not getting the information that you want when you're asking those questions, it's probably not a good deal for you to be involved in. Might be for somebody else, but maybe not for you. So if you get your spidey senses go off and the hairs on the back of your neck go up, maybe it's not a good deal for you. Sometimes though, you're going to get those spidey senses no matter what, and that's called taking a risk, right? Because no matter what you go into, you're taking a risk. Even the people that I'm comfortable with, I know when I invest with them, the money, the capital that I am giving them, I am putting that money at risk. But it's how do you mitigate that risk? You mitigate it by doing your own due diligence and by liking, and trusting the people that you invest with.
Yeah. Yeah. So as an LP investor, how much communication do you either require or like to receive from the GP team that you're investing with?
Honestly, at first it was like, okay, I want to know everything that's going on, involve me in everything. And it's like realistically, that's not feasible because, the folks that I know on the GP side, man, and I can tell you right now from trying to do it on my own right now, I know how busy you are. It's insane. So the way I like it right now, especially if it's a deal that I'm already involved in, as long as I'm getting like my quarterly updates that are showing, profit and loss statements, showing what the property's doing, what projects have been done, where the capital's going, then I'm a happy camper. I'm happy as a clam. If I'm once a quarter, let me know what's going on, and that's one of the things I built up this comfort level, right? Whereas at first I'm like, every couple weeks, I'm like, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? I wired my money. Did you guys close yet? This and that. Now leading up till closing, I kind of want to be in the loop as much as possible until that asset closes. Once the asset closes, I'm really paying attention until I start getting those payments, right? Because sometimes the asset might close and you might not get paid for 2-3 months, right? Maybe even longer. So that's when I'm really paying attention to what's going on. Okay, so when I get those quarterly reports, I'm really scrutinizing them. But once we get to a point where we're in a good rhythm, I'm getting paid monthly. I'm getting my returns. I mean, I will skim through the reports now. Like, okay, what's this? Are there specific things I'm looking for? Okay, what's vacancy look like now? How much did they make last month? What's our NOI? Okay, cool. I'm good. Okay, or let me watch this quick little 10-minute video they sent out. Okay, yeah, I'm comfortable. We're good. If there's something that's a red flag, I'll ask about it. Like we had one issue where, when we had that lumber shortage
Yes.
and stuff, it put a hamper on one of the projects, right? So I asked, I was like, hey, like, how is this going to affect my investment? Are you going to have to do a capital call and this and that? And you know what? The team that I invested with, they planned ahead that if they had these hiccups, that they were going to be okay. And guess what? They were okay. We went about 2 or 3 months without getting our return, which I was okay. But I'm okay with that happening instead of doing a capital raise, right? Because if I do a capital raise, I'm not getting a return on that money that I raised. I'm only getting a return on that initial investment. So for me, not getting paid for 3 months based off of a lumber shortage and other issues that came up with the project, I'm okay with that. So it worked out great. And that was the one that actually turned around and gave me that nice fat 21% check on my birthday. So, it's building up that trust with your partners because yes, you're an LP, but that P word is important. It's partner, right? So if you're not communicating with your GPs and they're not communicating with you and letting you know what's going on, that's not really a partnership. You know, I yes, there's transactions, but I don't want it to be transactional. I
Yeah.
want the relationship, the relationship of the partnership, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So have any of your investments thus far, with the way the economy is, interest rates sky high, have any of them had to have a capital call?
Thankfully, no, not with any of the ones that I'm in. However, I have a bunch of friends of mine that have invested with other groups
Yeah.
that have had capital calls, and they were hitting me up and asking me like, "Hey, Mike, what does this mean?" and this and that. And I explained to him. I said, "Look, a capital call is basically you're going to be sending more money." Um, to keep this thing afloat because something went wrong, right? You're not going to get a return on that money that you're sending in now, but you're saving your initial investment by it. But I said, read the fine print, because a lot of times, if you don't want to stay in that deal, you can get out and get your money back. But I said, make sure you read the fine print, because sometimes they might say that they could hold on to your initial capital until they actually close out on the deal and sell it, or repurpose and refinance and move around the debt. So you might have to wait for them to buy you out. But that's why it's important to read the fine print with any partnership you go into, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, thankfully I've not had that. I think the closest thing was where we just didn't get our returns for 3 months. Um, but with that, they were able to recover very quickly.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I think you also said right now you're actually transitioning to becoming active, being on a
Yep.
GP right now. How did you guys come together?
So the the group that I was working with recently, and I say was because our deal fell through.
Okay.
But my first capital raise was 1.25 million, right? Uh, Fell a quarter million short, right? Right at the end. And it really sucks because when you think about the entire raise, that is pennies in the bucket,
Yeah.
right? So that hurt a lot because we extended a couple times, and that's why that last quarter million, it just wasn't going to happen, right? Um, so that was painful. The other ones were with other partners that are actually out here in Hawaii with me. We've just been doing a lot of underwriting, right? Trying to find something that sticks. Once we find something that sticks, then I'm going to start raising capital for them. Um, but that's kind of been my experience as a GP so far. Lots of underwriting, lots of disappointments, and lots of learning. Right, so I definitely have learned a lot with these past couple deals that we underwrote, with only getting one under contract, and that one fell through.
Okay. Okay. So would you say that, okay, especially with this particular capital raise that you were working on, would you say that majority of the investors who came on board were they through your previous relationships, or was it through your podcast?
Yeah, so actually it was through my podcast, right? Most of the folks that I was reaching out to raise from is because I built a very large network, right? So my email list is essentially all folks that I got through my podcast.
Okay.
Um, yes, a lot of the folks I know personally, because there's people that listen to my podcast that I've met up with in person out here in Hawaii, and now I host a local meetup out here once a month, and they all come out to it, which is pretty awesome. Um, but yeah, so through networking, through going to real estate meetups, I met a bunch of people, and then also through my podcast itself, promoting my podcast at these different meetups and just getting it out there, kind of beating to my own drum. But yeah, I was always shouting from the rooftops, "Hey, check out my podcast! Check out my podcast! Check out my podcast!" And it started taking off. And that's one of the things I think that's really helped me build my network, and not just from people listening to the show, Cedric, but from doing stuff like what we're doing right now. All the guests that I've had on the show, man, I built up this network with so many real estate professionals. Uh, Literally now, I have what 227 episodes that have come out, but I've done I think 260 something interviews. So those are still all being processed and worked by my team. But I mean, think about that, man. 260 people that I've talked to in real estate. Not all real estate. Some of my podcast isn't 100% real estate, but most of the people I talk to are real estate investors. Man, it's great. I stay in touch with them. I think it's important to stay in touch with them because opportunities arise, like the one deal that I got into because of that, as well as the one that I got, was a GP on. That was also through my podcast as well, somebody that I met through there. So
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I had actually met Stephanie Walter, and I see that you had her on your podcast a little while back. So, yeah, very, very, very bright individual.
Stephanie's very smart. The way that she does business and works her syndications, she's crushing it for sure.
Yeah,
I've had a
exactly.
lot of people on my show that are crushing it, man. I love it. I love hearing their success stories and learning from them because the folks that are doing really good, man. I mean, that's I thrive off of their knowledge, and
Yeah,
I like to impart that on other people, which is why I share that with the world. That's why I have the podcast.
absolutely, absolutely. So, let's talk about the military real quick. So, do you still keep in touch with some of your comrades that you were in the military with?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny though, most of the people that I keep in touch with from the military are also real estate investors. That is where our bond got even stronger. Right now, not all of them. There's a lot of folks that I keep in touch with that don't invest in real estate. They did their thing. They got out. They're living that comfortable life right now, and they're like, Mike, you're crazy. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? And I'm like, because I love it. But yeah, absolutely. The relationships that you build over a 20-year career in the military, you can't describe it, man, in words. Some of the close friends that I've made, um, you know, they're just amazing people, amazing people. But especially the real estate investors. Again, that not only did we serve together, but we also talk shop on real estate, which is phenomenal. And I'm a part of a couple different communities of real estate investors, military real estate investors, including a mastermind that I'm in. That's one of the requirements is you have to be a veteran or active duty to be a member of that real estate mastermind. Um, Met some amazing people through there, man. It's awesome.
Nice. Yeah. I you actually jumped the gun on my second question, but it's all
Oh,
good, you know.
sorry.
No, but that's just how it is sometimes, you some of the people that you meet or that you served with, uh once they see something that you're doing, especially if it's constructive, they may want to learn or know a little bit more about it if they're not already doing it. So yeah, definitely, you're going to build that cohesion even tighter, especially if they were in the military and they're doing real estate at the same time. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
100% Cedric.
yeah. Now, how do you give back to the military community?
So that's a great question. One of the ways, again, like I said, I give back to everybody is through my podcast. But for the military community in particular, um, you know, being a part of the mastermind that I'm in is one way. Uh, but I also try to focus a lot of the efforts that I do um, to make it digestible for veterans, right? Because, we speak a different language a lot of the times. But there's different things that I like to do that I like to be a part of that give back. One of the things that I do out here in Hawaii that I just started doing last year, which was an absolute treat for me and really fun, is they have this. It's called a Reverent Warriors. They do the Silkies hike, and it's to raise awareness on veteran suicide. So I like to be involved with those guys. I actually sponsored them out here in Hawaii last year, so I was one of the platinum sponsors for that program. It to me it means a lot because as a veteran that's had that trouble with the transition with getting out and dealing with civilian life, I know how hard that can be.
Yeah.
So I like to share my story with fellow veterans that are going through the same or similar struggles, because there is life on the outside, and there are people there that can help you. And I like to be part of organizations like that.
Okay. I love it. Love it. So, as we begin to wrap up here, I have a last few questions for you. What is one belief you had as a beginning investor that has turned out to be false, but may be holding people back from taking the leap into real estate investing?
Cedric, probably one of the most common things that you hear people say as well is that you have to have money to make money, and that's not necessarily true. There's been a lot of times where it's OPM, using other people's money. Robert Kiyosaki talks a lot about that in Rich Dad Poor Dad. There are lots of opportunities out there. And I think, that was a false belief that I had, that I needed to have all of this cash to get into real estate. And that wasn't true.
Okay. So, and knowing what you know now, what piece of advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your real estate journey to make yourself have faster, easier, and smoother success?
Oh, this is a great one. So I actually have this. One of the things I like to talk about is my 4 pillars to building wealth, right? And you can apply these 4 pillars to anything in life, but especially to real estate, right? So those 4 pillars are education, mentorship and coaching, networking and relationships, and then the fourth one, which is the most important one, is action, taking action. Those other 3 don't mean anything if you don't take action. But for me, if I could go back and tell my younger self, I would tell myself, hey, Mike, before you get into this, just because you heard about this from a friend and everything, really educate yourself. Maybe go take a course, maybe get a mentor, get a coach, right? And really learn as much as you can about this. And start talking to other people that are doing this, that networking piece and building those relationships before you get into that fourth one, which is taking action. For me, it was kind of like I heard about it, I got excited, I jumped right in and took action. And man, I ran into problems. I did. I ran into a lot of problems. And I wound up getting that education. I paid for it too, right? I wound up getting that mentorship and coaching because I needed it. I had to seek help from other investors, which forced a lot of that other networking piece as well. So, yeah, I kind of forced myself into it by just jumping right in, which you can do. But to my younger self, I would say, hey, Mike, go really learn about this before you get into it for sure.
Nice, nice. So, is there any person, whether real estate related or not, that has led to your success?
Any particular person, I would go back and really say thank you to my uncle for putting that bug in my head. That initial conversation I had with him about real estate, I think, has always been the catalyst to my interest in real estate, right? But I would also go back and I would say, uh, honestly, thank you to everybody that I've ever met in the past in the real estate community, because I've learned so much from them. And even through my podcast, man, it's like I've learned so much from the people that I've brought on, and they've learned from me too. But it's that relationship that I've built with those folks has been absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, if it was one person, I would go back and tell my uncle, "Hey, man, thank you for putting this idea in my head because it's paid off later in life."
Sweet, sweet. Well, Mike, it has been a blast having you as our guest today. As we close out, please tell our listeners where we can learn more about you, get in touch with you, and learn about all the fabulous things you have going on right now.
Cedric, I really appreciate that. I make it easy for people to find all my stuff because I'm involved in so much stuff. You can just go to my personal website. It's mikecavaggioni.com. That's CAV as in Victor A, GGION as in November I. And there you'll find links to all my other websites. You'll find a link to my podcast, my financial coach, everything. Yeah, so and if you have questions on any of that stuff, there's a spot there. You could schedule a call with me. We could get together and chat. Always love to talk to people, especially if it's about real estate or any ways to build passive income, because I am an income enthusiast. I'd be happy to talk with you about that, side hustles, whatever it might be that you'd be interested in talking about. So, but Cedric, thanks, man. I appreciate that a lot.
All right. Awesome, Mike. Again, I want to thank you for your time today and all the wisdom you have provided to my listeners. It's greatly appreciated. And I want to thank you, our fans, for tuning in to the Service the Syndication Real Estate Podcast, where we provide value to you and your investing business. Please tune in to our next episode where we will interview another fantastic investing professional. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Service to Syndication podcast. We want you to know that we love and appreciate your support, and we are grateful about being a part of your journey to becoming a successful real estate entrepreneur. Please share this episode with a friend who you think will get a lot out of what you just heard. Send it to someone who you know is interested in real estate and dreams of having it all and being the best they can be in all areas of life. And if this was really valuable, share it on your social media stories and timelines. Thank you for watching and listening. Now go be great.